The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek episode number 38.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And folks, there is more all the time. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Discovery, Light and Shadows. Joining me today on the panel, as always, are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father
How's
Corey.
it going?
And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, but first, before we start off, I want to remind you to like The Secrets of Star Trek on Facebook, retweet it on Twitter, leave us comments on our website or on Facebook or on Twitter. If you have not yet done so, and I don't know why you would not have yet, but if you have not done so, please subscribe. You can do so in iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app like the iTunes podcast app or Overcast or Pocket Cast. There's a bunch of them. You could subscribe on YouTube, where you should hit the bell if you want to get notifications when we post a new episode. And please, above all, share the podcast with your friends. Help us grow this community of Star Trek fans. We're growing all the time, but we want to grow to reach all kinds of folks. And because the larger the community, the more fun it is, frankly. I mean, it's fun when you get a lot of people together talking about something you love, and we all love Star Trek. So let's do that. Before we do anything else, too, I do have a request. I have an ask. SQPN, that's the network that Secrets of Star Trek is part of. We need volunteers. We're a small nonprofit staffed primarily by volunteers. Father Corey is a volunteer. Jimmy's a volunteer. In fact, I'll tell you, folks, they actually donate money to their nonprofit, just right off the bat, because they believe in it. Not only are they on the show, but they donate to it, and that's dedication. And I just say that they didn't know I was going to say that, but I just say that because I want you to know that people who do this, we love it, and we're doing it out of love. But we need volunteers. We're growing so fast. We're adding new shows. Secrets of Star Trek is a new show, and we need more help to keep growing. And what we need are people, if you know audio editing, if you know how to use a website like WordPress, even just posting stuff. You don't have to maintain it or build a website. You just need how to post stuff on WordPress. We need people who can help us post on social media. We're looking for people to help us do some organization behind the scenes, like a producer almost, just to keep things organized, remind people of shows coming up. If you have the ability to help for maybe an hour a week, maybe two, whatever time you have, we're looking for help just to keep it going so we can continue to grow and bring you great new shows like Secrets of Star Trek. So if you're interested, and we'll have a conversation, this is not a commitment, send an email to help@sqpn.com. We really greatly appreciate it. All right, all the preliminaries aside, let's talk about this latest episode of The Secrets of Star Trek, this latest episode of Star Trek Discovery, which is what we're discussing.
It was in space.
Yes, it took place in space. Yeah. Well, and on Vulcan. So we start off with another voiceover. This has become the thing, and this is a voiceover this time from Michael Burnham. She's making a personal log, and she says...
you know what I want is because all these opening monologues are overly dramatic.
Yes.
Or highly dramatic. I want the emotional Tilly monologue. The super serious Tilly monologue.
Yeah,
I'm
kind of
surprised
they haven't done that yet. That'll be fun, actually, when we get a Tilly opening monologue. We have not yet had a Captain Pike one, which is interesting. So that's kind of an interesting.
And that is kind of an interesting choice on their part. I mean, at least bringing back the kind of the opening monologue is flashing back to the other series, but we haven't had
Captain's
an actual Captain's log. Yeah,
yeah, we have not yet had that. Although when Saru was in command, did they do that last season? They might have. I don't know.
We've had personal logs, I think, too.
Right.
Yep.
Anyway. So Burnham starts off by saying, my mother taught me the greatest mysteries come in threes: birth, life, death, the past, the present, the future. And I'm thinking, In other words, life is its own greatest mystery. Life's greatest mysteries are birth, life, and death. That's like pretty much everything.
Yeah. Now, of course, as Christians, we'd say there's one more they missed. One very, 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 very big one.
The biggest mystery, yes, that come in threes. Well, and that's sort of a bit of a God-shaped echo in this episode. I have to say, that idea of the mysteries that come in threes, and the Trinity. We talk about God as being a mystery, and that the mystery is the Trinity. So that's an interesting idea. And then she says the past, the present, the future. And that's where the Red Angel is from. And so she says, we now have confirmation that the Red Angel is from the future.
Yeah, and that was my first problem with this episode, because we got evidence last episode that the Angel is technological, because it's like a super suit. Someone is in the super suit. As Father Corey pointed out, it has a feminine silhouette. So presumably it's a woman in the super suit. I immediately, once I went back and looked at the image and saw that was correct, I sent Dom a message and said, okay, chance it's Michael Burnham in there.
Yeah.
I don't know that it will be, but maybe. But now we're being told it's definitely from the future. And I'm going, wait a minute, didn't you just say there are these three things? So that means there are two other locations in time besides the future it could come from.
Right.
If it's a time traveler, it could come from the past, or it could come from the present. It could just be alien tech.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they talked about seeing the tachyon emissions, which would be,
right. They needed to say, and they led to the future.
Well, that's the thing. Is a time traveler, like you and I have been talking about, Jimmy, recently on the Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. The time traveler could be coming from the past or the future. And just because they show evidence of high tech doesn't necessarily mean they're from the future. There are aliens with unbelievable technology. Yeah.
And even if it came from the future immediately, before then it might have come from the past. It might have just been stopping off in the future. I mean, that's what the TARDIS does. So they need to think a little more four-dimensionally.
Yeah, but given that they have decided that this is that they've decided to tell us it's confirmed the future, we're just going to, have to assume that this person comes from the future. Yeah, and that's that because they said so. So
unless they pull the rug out from under that later in the season.
Yes, that would be kind of awkward, but yeah.
It wouldn't be the first time they've done that.
Yeah, it'd be a little too come on, the unreliable narration is you have to use it sparingly in a story, or you start to get people not trusting your audience. So Burnham thinks that if Section 31 is looking for Spock, then Discovery needs to find him first. She doesn't trust Section 31, and she thinks that it has to be me. So she's taking a shuttle to Vulcan, while Discovery sticks around Kaminar, examining the residual traces of the Red Angel signal.
Yeah, and just totally leaving the Kelpians in the Ba'ul to sort out their multi-generational homicidal feud among themselves.
Right, exactly. Right. And we'll get to the problems with that, leaving them to their own. Toward the end of the episode, there is something Discovery does that seems to be problematic, but we'll talk about that. So there are the Discovery, Burnham's off heading to Vulcan. So Discovery's there and scanning this anomaly, which apparently is now there, which I didn't see last episode, but is there now.
Yeah, certainly they can now see the remnants of this red signal.
Yeah, apparently. And it's the extreme tachyon interface is preventing scans. So they've come up with some mumbo jumbo, some techno babble that explains that they can't scan it, so they try to get closer and get caught in a time rift.
Yeah, and I don't know that it's this way presently, but it wouldn't at all surprise me. But if you read like accounts of the 1980s and 90s Star Wars writers' rooms, they would apparently write things in the script as like placeholders, where they would say, we need to tech the tech.
Yes.
And it was just a placeholder for insert technobabble later. Right. Some of this has that same kind of feel.
And apparently Michael Okuda, who was responsible for a lot of the on-set visual effects, like the displays and that sort of stuff, he was the guy back in the Next Generation Deep Space Nine days for coming up with some of that. So,
by the way, speaking of funny monosyllabic words, we have freak here as another replacement word, and also frick.
Yes.
And they use that to tell us that Tilly has been given instructions not to curse during business hours. And I kind of like that. I think that's a signal that they they got criticism last season for introducing cussing on Star Trek, for the real world cussing on Star Trek for the first time. And so that may be another signal they're sending the fans that, okay, we've heard you, we're backing off on this. Yeah, and that would be nice. I was a little disappointed, though, if they're going to give us freak and frick, and this is a sci-fi show, they didn't give us frack.
Yeah, I was going to say they missed an opportunity to kind of tip the hat to Battlestar Galactica there. But
yeah. I thought that was a little odd, like to make a big deal out of Tilly saying freaking. But now that you say that, I get why they're doing that then.
There's a long history of such substitutions on television. I remember when I was in college, I watched the soap opera All My Children, and they would use sweat and as a substitute. And Larry Niven, you read his older stuff, and he'll either have people saying futz, or he will have them saying, and then he said something that your editor would delete.
Of course, the best for that on TV right now is The Good Place, which because they're in heaven, they can't say, they have to say fork, and I have to think of what the words are without saying the actual word.
Shirt is another
shirt, one. Yes, and that sort of thing. So yes, which is a great
filter.
Yeah, it's a great what's the word? There's a word for when you replace the words like that.
Minced oaths is one way of referring to those things.
Yeah, you could say that.
Like,
yeah.
So
Pike is he gets annoyed at Tyler. Tyler is
and Tyler is frankly pretty annoying.
Well, they've really made him unlikable this season. I mean, just really unlikable.
Tyler just immediately challenges Pike again.
He's mad that Burnham is gone off the ship and he wasn't informed, which Pike rightly tells him she's taking personal leave. It's none of your business. Of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Technically, she's going to search for Spock, so that really kind of is his business. But yeah.
Also, I mean, and there's also a personal dimension, since he and she were a thing last season. But then it's on her to tell him if she's leaving. It's not on Pike to. By the way, your ex-girlfriend has left the ship.
Right, and then Tyler does the thing like he says to Pike, if it has to do with Spock, you owe me an explanation, and then tosses his Section 31 badge at the captain. If I were the captain, I would don't you toss your thing at me?
Yeah.
Like it's getting this whole like showing the badge is getting a little much, by the way.
It was nice though that Pike immediately responds, cheer trumps
rank the badge.
Cheer trumps the badge. Yeah.
If now, since they've established that these are communicators now, the Section 31 comm badges, it's the equivalent of flipping someone the brand new hot iPhone. And so I would just say, hey, thanks, and stick it in my pocket.
Yes, exactly. So Pike, they can't get the ship any closer. Saru's got this probe that he wants to shoot in. So Pike says, I'll fly the shuttlecraft in. I'm the best pilot on board. I was originally a test pilot when I entered Starfleet, which is kind of cool. And Tyler says, "Oh, I'll go with you," and Pike calls him a bad penny, like he is a bad penny that keeps turning up. And he refers to.
By the way, there's nice temporal distortions on the bridge before that. They handle them in a way we haven't quite seen before on Star Trek, and it's nice to see little time echoes, and it's a little disorienting, but you can figure out what's going on.
Right, we've thought that something like that in Next Gen, so it's actually kind of nice to see them continuing, like keeping continuity in that sort of special effect. At one point, Pike refers to Valk inside of Tyler as his shadow, which is was interesting. He doesn't trust him and won't tell him anything about Burnham's personal mission because of that. And I think that's interesting. And then, of course, Tyler throws it back at him like, you just don't know that the war is over. You're mad that you missed the war.
Yeah, and there's some interesting psychology that Tyler does on Pike in this. And immediately when Pike says, I'm the most qualified shuttle guy, I'm going on this mission, it's like, okay, this was okay for James T. Kirk back in the 60s, but it is totally not credible
right,
to have the commanding officer doing this. And initially I was annoyed that nobody was calling him on this. But then they do provide us an explanation for why he is taking such a risk when he really shouldn't.
And Tyler does call him on it.
And Tyler is correct. And by the end of the episode, Pike admits, you're right. That's why I took this risk, and some others too.
Right.
And because I did feel guilty about sitting out the war, and I've been trying to prove myself as a result. And why he would admit that to Tyler, I have no clue, but it's nice that they acknowledged the implausibility of this. And it also serves as a, Enkidu and Gilgamesh fight and become friends, Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra moment.
Right.
So I think by the end of the episode, Tyler and Pike have bonded somewhat.
There's go ahead.
I see. I disagree with Jimmy, though, that I found it annoying. And the second time I watched it, I found it even more annoying that Tyler was sitting there playing the amateur psychologist. If Pike wasn't such a nice guy, I think Tyler would have found himself beamed back onto Discovery before they got anywhere close to the time vortex. It's just like, shut up, sit there and do your job.
Although part of that might be that Pike knows that he's right, which he eventually says. Something to keep in mind about Pike is, where is Pike in his life at this point, in his career?
After Talos 4, but before the original series starts.
Right. So we're after the events of The Cage, which is important. We'll come to that at the end of this episode. Yes. After the events of The Cage, before whatever accident lands him in that chair that we have in the Seaman in the Menagerie, and he's a legend. Pike is a legend. I mean, there's that famous battle, remember, where he single-handedly fought off a horde of Rigelians or something to save a bunch of people. Remember that scene from The Cage where they made him relive it? Giant hairy Viking dudes with scary teeth. Yes, and maids in Wimple and such. A very strange planet. But he's a legend. I mean, eventually at some point there will be the Pike Medal of Honor in Starfleet. This guy is. I mean, Kirk's a big deal, but Pike is a big deal too. So here he is in this scene, and I can see why the regular crew would defer to Pike at this. This is Pike. He's going to go and save the day. He's going to get on the shuttle. He's the best. We're going to defer to him. But Tyler is he's not really Starfleet anymore. He doesn't know what he is, and he's willing to kind of call him on it, which I thought was an interesting dynamic in that. He was sort of never really Starfleet. Well, yes. I mean, and objectively speaking, never Starfleet in one sense. In fact, when Tyler complains to Pike, hey, because Pike talks about his shadow, he's like, look, I can't get rid of this shadow. And Pike says, I know the feeling, meaning I can't get rid of you either. Exactly. That was a good moment. So then we that's where we go to the open. And I come back to Act 1 of the show after the open, and we're at Vulcan, and it's raining on Vulcan. It's a thunderstorm. It's like, yay, we get to see something other than stereotypical weather on a planet. Normally it's like every planet has one climate zone and one form of weather, and that's all we ever see. Exactly. And they've previously established Vulcan as a largely desert planet, and so seeing a thunderstorm on Vulcan is great. It's like, yes, it does rain in the desert. Even out here in California, in Death Valley, it rains, and that's what causes the sailing stones to sail. Exactly. Yep. So, and then there's the plants. And I love the production design of Vulcan in this. It was really kind of neat. It had a real interesting, cohesive feel to the culture. I mean, Vulcan is one of the cool species of Star Trek. We really should develop it more than it ever has been. More than just logic and non-emotion, and blowing it up, right? I mean, you don't step on Superman's cape, you don't spit in the wind, you don't take the mask off the Lone Ranger, and you don't blow up Vulcan. You don't. Yeah, exactly. Hear me, J.J. Abrams, fix that. So Burnham shows up. She comes home. She sees Amanda. Amanda doesn't trust Burnham. And she is mad. She's still mad at her from the last time they saw each other. And she says she's lying to her. Right. And she says that Sarek has been practicing something called Tokmar ever since Spock disappeared, which is an ancient Vulcan discipline that's believed to bring lost souls back home. Probably usually through like Vulcan telepathic ability, that sort of thing. And it's not working. And Burnham knows that Amanda knows why. She knows that she's lying. And she knows that she knows why. So then we leave them there and we switch back to Kaminar, and
they're going into the time rift, and they're taking it slow because Tilly warns them they're going to get time bends if they go too fast.
Right, because you got to put time in front of it. So there's an interesting moment,
and it's nice for them to hang a lantern on that, because that is one of the cliches of science fiction. You hang space or time or something in front of ordinary words. And to have Tilly say everything sounds cooler when you put time in front of it. Is like, okay, that's really meta. I like that.
Yep. So while they're launching Saru's probe, Pike sees an echo of the future where he and Tyler appear to be having a phaser battle. So that puts him on watch. That is he going to have to take out Tyler? Does it confirm his bias?
It was kind of interesting is just that they put that in there because, with stuff that's going, not to get political, but I mean, there have been issues in politics today where videos and quotes have been taken out of context.
Right. And
once you see the larger quote, you see that there was actually nothing there, but there was an uproar when you saw this little clip out of context.
Interesting.
And, kind of reminder of, you really should get the bigger context before you react.
which Pike does. He doesn't let this affect him and start making him be paranoid or anything.
Exactly.
What this reminded me of was Babylon 5, and specifically the episode Babylon Squared from the first season, where we have the two male leads on that show. The commander and the security guy on a shuttle traveling into a temporal anomaly to meet a vanished space station. And there are slight glimpses of the future out of context that you don't know the context for. And so it reminded me a lot of Babylon Squared.
Interesting. Nice. Yeah. Sheridan and Garibaldi?
Sheridan and Garibaldi.
Oh, good. Yep. Been a long time since
not Sinclair and Garibaldi.
Sinclair. All right. The original captain. I haven't watched Babylon 5 in so long. I wasn't sure I remembered. So the shuttle does get sucked into the time rift, and the distortions make time jumbled and therefore normally impossible for Discovery to find them. But Stamets, his tardigrade DNA, which has now become an official MacGuffin, it's become like it's the all-purpose tool for fixing time-related things. It makes him immune to the effects of time distortions and may make him able to track them. And then Stamets says that beyond the event horizon of the time rift, time exists all at once. Jimmy, that sounds very interesting and familiar.
Yeah, it's not. Well, they contradict it because they then say it's like a blender, which actually seems to be more like what they experience. They don't experience everything all at once. They experience a jumble of things.
Right. We recently talked about time travel, the idea of time travel on Mysterious World.
Mysterious World.
And there was one of the theories of time is that, the outside of time, there is you experience time all at once. That God experiences time all at once. That's how he sees time all as at once. That's how he knows the future. I have condensed and
condensed
to detriment. Thank you for not correcting me on that one. So we kind of leave them in jeopardy here while they're fixing that, and we go back to Vulcan. So that's essentially how this episode is going to go. We get two places, and we're going to jump back and forth. And it turns out that Burnham has somehow found, and I'm not sure they ever explained how she finds Spock, but she found
Amanda told her.
Oh, she did.
She calls Amanda on it, and then Amanda reveals it to her. That's why the two of them are there together.
That's right. They're there together, right? Because it's Sarek who walks in on them. So Spock is in this crypt. It's a Katra crypt where Katras are stored. Go see Star Trek: The Search for Spock for more on that.
They say Katra stones are there, and that's what's blocking Sarek's telepathic contact with Spock.
Right.
By the way,
mental interference.
Real quick before I forget, there's another link to Search for Spock in this.
What's that?
They said that Spock's shuttle was found in the Mutara sector.
Yeah.
Which also later became the location of the Genesis planet.
Right. Which is where Spock is reborn.
Yeah, yep. I wondered if they may go anywhere with that. My suspicion is that it's just a throwaway nod.
Yeah,
that's just a wink to the fans, probably more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what this whole season is a search for Spock. I mean, in about 30 years, they're going to redo all of this again.
Yeah. What I really liked is, so Spock is in the temple and he's trying to control a mental freak out he's having. And the way he's doing it is by reciting the fundamental laws of logic. And it's like, this was a real treat for me because my academic training is in philosophy. I mean, I've had courses in both informal logic and formal logic, and what he's doing, what he's muttering there is real.
Right.
It's based on real logic and real philosophy of logic. And it was a lot of fun for me. He's talking about the difference between inductive and deductive arguments, and he's wrestling in his mutterings with the problem of induction, which is a classic problem in philosophy. An inductive argument is where you say, okay, well, this swan was white and that swan was white and every other swan I've seen is white. So that supports the conclusion that all swans are white, but it doesn't prove it because there could be a black swan out there.
Right.
And so inductive arguments never give you conclusive proof the way deductive arguments do.
Right.
And there's like a famous problem. There's a 20th century philosopher named Goodman who posed a problem of the Grue emeralds. And the idea is, we see emeralds as green, but maybe they really, instead of having the property of being green, they have the property of being Grue, which is being green up to a certain point in time and then all changing to become blue. And the evidence for the inductive evidence for emeralds being green is identical to the evidence for emeralds being Grue. And so I was just waiting for Spock to mention the Grue emeralds, but he never did.
Well,
I was waiting for him to mention
you can never prove a negative.
Right.
Because you can come up with all the cases in the world of why this doesn't happen, but all you have to find is one case where it does happen.
I was waiting for him to mention T'Plana Hoth, which is, if you remember from Voyage Home, when he's being tested after his Katra is reunited to his body, he's got the testing dome and he's asked like all these questions of logic and science all at once. And I always remember the name. I don't remember what the question was, but I remember the name T'Plana Hoth as the answer. So in case I ever get asked that in a Vulcan SAT, I'm ready.
I missed something real quick. That's the scene from Star Trek of the Voyage Home.
That's from the Voyage Home at the beginning of it when Spock's being tested.
My favorite thing from that is it's named so-and-so's first law of metaphysics. And the answer is nothing that is unreal exists. And it's like, yep, that's a good candidate for a first law of metaphysics.
Yeah, exactly.
So another moment actually in this scene is another reference again to Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, which is Amanda says she didn't tell Sarek that Spock is there because he would weigh the needs of the many and doesn't finish her sentence, which is against the needs of the few of the one, which was what Spock says, when he dies on the spoilers, when he dies on board the Enterprise in Wrath of Khan.
I'm glad someone on this show is weighing the needs of the many and the needs of the few, because we've pointed out in recent episodes there has not been enough weighing of the needs of the many versus the needs of the few lately.
Right. Well, Section 31 apparently is, although I think in some cases they might be weighing the needs of the single one myself, but looking like we're weighing the needs of the many. I think that might be part of what they're doing. But yes, I agree. I'm glad Sarek is there to weigh the needs of the many. So in addition to reciting these logic mantras, the doctrines over and over again, he's writing a series of numbers on the wall. He's scratching them into the wall, 841947. And
which have to be mysterious for some reason.
Right. Well, you have to punch it into the computer every 102 minutes to prevent the island from exploding. Oh, wait, that's
okay.
That's I'm sorry, that's lost. So we'll find out later on that, in fact, we found out here. Amanda tells Sarek that she used to read Alice in Wonderland to Spock. We saw that in a couple earlier episodes, her reading it to Michael as a boy because he had difficulty learning because he inherited from his human nature something that he inherited from Amanda, dyslexia. Spock is dyslexic. I thought, wow.
They say spatial, and so the Vulcan term for what he's got is Latak Terias.
Yes.
And they explain that as spatial and order dysphagia, similar to dyslexia, common on Earth, but not on Vulcan. That's why they know he inherited it from Amanda.
Right.
And I really like the fact that Spock had this learning disability, and that's what part of what alienated him from other Vulcans. And nevertheless, he's considered really smart.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of tension that the viewer might wonder about. How could someone who's supposed to be really smart have a learning disability? Well, I do.
Yes.
I am dyslexic. And when I was a kid, I did not start reading the way other kids did. It was harder for me. And this was the early 70s, and they put me on a special pre-computer machine to help me learn to read. And by the time I was in 5th grade, I was reading on an 8th grade level. But early on, and I still have the effects of it, but early on, I had a learning disability, but people generally seem to think I'm pretty bright. And so that rang true for me with Spock. It also didn't hurt that Mr. Spock was my role model when I was a kid.
Well, I think it's great for kids who have learning disabilities to see someone like Spock, that he's brilliant and overcame his disability. What are you going to say, Father Corey?
The thing I see, though, is, and I don't think this, but I can see some fans definitely saying, okay, really, this is just going way too far. First of all, you made our favorite character from the original series insane.
Yeah.
And then
now
he's also got a learning disability. I mean, really? Can you quit this already? Can you quit beating up our favorite character?
I could see some fans saying that. I mean,
I'm not saying I agree with that, but I can hear some fans already screaming, "Leave Spock alone." Are you just going to kill him off next and forget anything happened after that?
I have to say, I mean, there is a little merit to that, which is, I'm afraid of we have the one character from our favorite series that started it all that's in this series. And they just keep using him as a tool to up the drama. And so far, he hasn't been in and of himself. He's been a MacGuffin. He hasn't been in and of himself important. He hasn't done really anything yet. And that does bug me a little bit. So I agree with that part a little bit.
At least they're making progress with this plot line. They didn't wait until the final 2 or 3 episodes to finally show Spock on screen.
They did wait to the midpoint of the series, almost literally.
If I was, that's a reasonable choice for writers. I mean, you don't want them to be found immediately, but you also don't want it to go on for too long. And it's kind of a judgment call about exactly when do you. I think one thing that'll happen is in binge watching this in the future, I noticed there are certain series that are better binged than doing it week to week.
Yeah.
I actually think The Good Place is an example of that. In the current season, The Good Place, watching it week to week, there were a few weeks where they were in a particular story arc I thought was a little slow. But then when I watched it in binge form with a friend, it's like, oh, we saw this in 2 hours. It was fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's an interesting change in how TV is created and enjoyed. Yeah. So Sarek wants Burnham to bring Spock to Leland because he says Section 31 is motivated to heal Spock in order to get the information he has about the Red Angel, which is unusually naive of Sarek, I think. And on the other hand, I love his bit about you're going to destroy Spock and you're going to destroy yourself, Michael, if you don't do something.
Yes.
Again. And he's right. And I love I refuse to lose both of my children on the same day.
And he gets visibly emotional there.
Yeah.
Which means that's a big deal.
Well, and it was interesting, too. He contrasts him with Amanda in this scene because as he's walking in, she says, that as the wife of the ambassador, I have the legal authority to, keep Spock from you. And of course, he walks in and says, unless the ambassador disagrees. But then she turns around and, and he's quoting his authority on her and says, well, I don't live under your authority. I'm your wife. Amanda, you just quoted his authority. Yeah, you do.
But
it's interesting, though. It is interesting, though, because you see Sarek as the example of the logic, the Vulcan logical mind, and Amanda as the illogical, emotional human.
Right.
And there's I like that contrast between the two of them.
Yeah.
I liked, and he's right. I mean, she has no ability to invoke diplomatic immunity without his consent.
Right.
So on that, she does have to depend on his authority. That's the source of her authority for diplomatic immunity, is his status as ambassador.
Right.
But what I love is watching a Vulcan spousal, argument.
Exactly.
Like, we haven't seen this before. This is cool. And I like how both of them, have valid points of view, and they're going at each other, and they're not screaming, because that's not the Vulcan way. But that's the equivalent of what we're seeing here.
Yeah, right. What you see from Sarek was literally him yelling, at least, again, as Vulcans would do.
Well, it would be like a human married to a Klingon. You know what I mean? Like that level of, can you imagine having a Klingon woman coming at you like that? That much emotion Amanda was showing was equivalent to a Klingon woman showing emotion to her human husband.
Exactly.
Which, so B'Elanna Torres' dad, I mean, I could kind of, feel some sympathy for him. I mean, he made that bet, but so we're back to Burnham is going to bring Spock back to Section 31. That's how we end that.
By the way, before we close that out, we didn't mention that how Amanda found Spock, because the previous thing we've seen with her is, I'm going to go find him, and it turns out he came to her. So they just mentioned that in a line of dialogue. Spock came to her because he's locked in a logic loop, and he clearly needs to be rebooted.
Right. So we jump back to the shuttle over Kaminar in the Time Rift, and Tyler and Pike are in the shuttle, and the probe comes back, but it's had an upgrade.
It's a mechanical squid now.
Yes, it's now got Windows 10.
It's now Doc Ock.
Yeah. Well, they got a Windows 10 upgrade. So it has a bunch of octopus arms, and it's attacking the shuttle. And meanwhile, Tyler accuses Pike of wanting to make up for missing the war by putting himself in a dangerous, near suicidal situation, which is, not necessarily wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really advance much more beyond that little battle there. Before we have the Act 3, we have the third part of the show, and we jump back to Burnham showing up with Spock to the Section 31 ships. More of these cool, I gotta say, they're cool looking little starships that Section 31 has.
Yeah, and it's more Babylon 5 echoes, because these are like the Black Omega Psychor Raiders. So Section 31 really feels like Psychor from Babylon 5 in this series.
Yeah, that's true.
Including their outfits and everything with the leather jackets and things like that.
Although
the special insignia.
On the original Section 31 and Deep Space Nine, they were already in black with the black insignia. So, but even then, people said DS9 was a ripoff of Babylon 5, so that's not really much of an argument. Leland comes across as helpful and sympathetic to Spock and Burnham, which immediately sets off your warning signs that this is something underhanded is going on, because this is Section 31, and we know that they're underhanded. And then he says, "We'll take care of Spock. He's in good hands, but you're not allowed to stay on board the ship. You should go rest on Starbase 23." Like, seriously?
Get out.
Just lock me in a room. I can't even be on the ship. That's very suspicious.
And to confirm her suspicions, Georgiou comes out of the shadows and says, "Guess what? He's lying to you."
Right. And so far in this season, Georgiou has never lied to Burnham. And she came out and said that last time, and it's true. She has not yet lied to her.
She was even bluntly honest about, Leland's just doing his job. He's a soldier. He does what he needs to do. He's a stooge for the higher ups. I'm in this for myself.
Right.
This works out for me. You get Spock out, you're good to go. You get Spock out, I get a benefit too.
Right. She gets the one up on Leland and get more powerful in Section 31.
Yeah. So she tells Michael that the machine that Leland said is going to repair Spock's neural pathways is actually a memory extractor that will destroy his mind. And
which sounds a lot like the memory sifter of the Mirror Universe, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. We've seen similar technologies. Romulans have something like that in the Deep Space Nine era.
Right. However, I wonder if Georgiou had a hand in making this one.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, at a minimum, she would know what it is then, just because she's used them.
Right. Right. So,
by the way, I love a little bit of dialogue business that that Giorgio and Michael have, where Giorgio is like, "Ooh, you manipulated your mother. I so wish I had the chance to do that to mine. If only she'd lived longer." And Michael asks if she killed her own mother, and she says, "It's all a blur."
Yeah. Man, I love Michelle Yeoh in this. I mean, she has just been so great. I just fantastic.
She's been great as in the dialogue and everything, and of course the scene where Michael escapes, quote unquote.
Yeah, that's great. So she's disabled the security cams or the security network for like 60 seconds, and that only. It's going to kick back on in a few seconds. And so she tells her, "You need to attack me now." And Michael totally does.
no hesitation.
So what are you going to... Yeah.
Make it look good. Okay. Wham.
Yeah, exactly.
Although, I'm sorry. The act, I can't remember the actress' name who plays Michael. But taking out... We've said this before. Taking out Michelle Yeoh.
Martin Green.
Yeah. I don't know by it. Michelle Yeoh is the best. But
it was an impressively choreographed scene.
Yes, it was. Yeah. That was a well done fight scene. Yes, I have to agree.
I also love during part of the escape. You know, they switched to using phasers, and Giorgio shoots at Michael and misses, but comes really close. And Michael looks back at her like, "What are you doing?" And she just Giorgio just shrugs. You know, it's like, I have to make this look good.
Exactly. She kind of grazes her shirt, a little bit, and it's like, "Let's go. What are you doing?"
So and then she escapes with Spock, and then meanwhile back at Discovery, in the shuttle, Stamets realizes that he needs to be the one to transport the shuttle to fly it out. To jump back a little bit, I forgot to mention, Pike came up with this idea of dumping fuel and igniting it every once in a while as sort of a flare to alert Discovery to where they are, to help them find them, which is what Stamets eventually and Tilly eventually use. So Pike now realizes that the probe that's now been upgraded has traveled 500 years into the future and was modified. With nice modification. One of the probe arms gets inside and attacks Tyler, and that's what Pike had seen earlier. That he thought he was in a battle with Tyler. It turned out he was about to shoot the probe that had Tyler in its grip.
And it was interesting too, where Tyler switches over to Klingon when he's at that moment. He's not speaking Klingon.
That's right, under stress.
And because of the decontextualization of the original vision, you don't realize it's not Pike attacking Tyler, it's Pike helping Tyler.
Exactly.
Right. Just like in Babylon 5, the flash forward of G'Kar strangling Londo is not G'Kar trying to hurt Londo, it's G'Kar trying to save Londo.
Yep.
Right.
By killing him, admittedly.
Right.
And again, this is where, anything like this, you got to have the context. You got to have the wider understanding of what's going on.
Exactly. And so the severed probe arm then it embeds itself in the control console, where it starts to suck up all the data in the computer. And meanwhile, Stamets beams over from Discovery into the time rift because
plot. Because he's the only one who can navigate through it to get them free of the anomaly. But the probe starts to pull them back in. Every time I get up, they start pulling me back in, as the Godfather says. And they are beamed out of the shuttle as it self-destructs. But then the cyborg crew member, whose name I can never remember,
Commander Ariam.
Thank you. I will eventually remember. She gets a virus from the probe embedded in her, which is the danger of. And so now we have, is the first android member of Starfleet not Data, or she's a cyborg?
She's not android. She's. I think they're implying that she's part biological. She's a cyborg.
She's a transhuman of whatever species she's originally part of.
I wonder if she's like a proto Borg. Interesting. So now that the shuttle has exploded, it has destabilized the time rift, and it's going to create a time tsunami because
which sounds cooler than it really is.
Yeah. So they jump ahead just ahead of it and save themselves from the disaster of getting caught in a time tsunami. What about Kaminar?
Yeah, that was my thought too. So what happened to the planet? Does this affect the planet at all?
Yeah, Saru seems unconcerned. So maybe he knows something we don't.
Maybe we'll get some time ripples on Kaminar. That'll be about it.
And there are ways they could finesse that, but the point is they don't.
Right.
They don't finesse it.
It's a plot hole that they've left hanging.
Yeah. Speaking of plot holes they've left hanging, we have this V'ger problem here of, if you get a technologically inferior probe, what's going to be your first impulse?
Upgrade
it and send it back, or just send one of your own technologically superior probes in the first place.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly.
And that's just not plausible.
Well, at least
it keeps happening in Star Trek.
Well, at least in the motion picture, the technological creatures that V'ger encounters view it as a life form and therefore upgrade it. So that at least has an explanation. This doesn't have that. This is like what was the one from the original series, Nomad? This is more like
Changeling.
The Changeling, right? So that's the thing I don't get is why do they assume that this probe comes from the Red Angels? That their motives might actually be dangerous. Could there not be other people in the future?
Exactly. Yes, I was just going to go there because so not only does this probe come back for no good reason, and why is it sucking the data on the computer? What is a shuttle going to have that wasn't in the data banks of the probe?
Right.
You already know everything that's in the data banks of the probe. What are you getting out of this?
What are they looking for? Right.
Well, and the fact if they're 500 years in the future, wouldn't they have all the data that would already be there just from being 500 years in the future? Assuming there wasn't like a massive data loss somewhere.
But you're right, Dom. I mean, just like in the beginning, they're assuming things are from the future just because. They're assuming here that the probe has the same motives as the Red Angel, and it's not a rival faction, which would be the obvious dramatic solution here.
Right.
For why the Red Angel seems to do good, but the probe seems to attack.
Right.
So,
which brought up the question for me: are we going to see, and probably not, but are we going to see a resurgence of the temporal Cold War from Enterprise?
I've been worried about that, and I really hope not, because that was the worst thing about Enterprise.
Yes. Well, that's what hurt Enterprise, in my opinion. But
we may get a temporal Cold or Hot War, but I don't think it's going to be the same one.
That would be preferable.
Yeah. So also with all this 500 years in the future business now, we may be linking up to the short trek Calypso, where we saw the Discovery 1,000 years in the future.
That's a very good point. It's interesting. So Pike admits that Tyler was right about his motivations, that he had missed the war and was trying to seek glory, which doesn't make any sense really, because Pike just like I said before, Pike is already a legend. So why is he
that may be why he may feel like I've had a really good reputation up to now, and then I had to sit this thing out, and there was something that drove him psychologically to become a legend,
I guess,
and so it's kind of like, okay, then I'm sidelined for this thing. It's like I didn't get to do what I could do.
Right, that's possible, I guess. And then meanwhile, Tyler admits that Pike was right because he was the most qualified for the mission and the best pilot, etc. So love fest all around. Giorgio, meanwhile,
Kumbaya. No,
Kumbaya. Giorgio, meanwhile, back in the Section 31 ship, tells Leland, basically, because Leland thinks Giorgio let Spock and Burnham escape, and
which she did,
and then so she, in order to keep him from calling her out, she says, "By the way, I know your secret that you're responsible for the death of Burnham's parents because, of course." Dramatically, of course.
And of course, I was going to say in the background, you hear that dramatic music. Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. Because everybody's connected. So Burnham is got Spock. She realizes that the numbers that Spock's repeating are backwards because he's dyslexic.
Okay, so here's an issue.
Yes.
You can Google almost any number. And you will come up with a web page, frequently on Wikipedia, but you will come up with a web page that has all kinds of interesting facts about this number. And you can Google really big numbers, and that'll happen for them. And so here we have a 6-digit number, only 6 digits.
Right.
It's in the millions. Amanda has time Googled this thing.
Yeah.
And come up with nothing, which is implausible in and of itself. You could Google it today and you would find stuff. Oh yeah, but
I find lots of houses for sale if you search for 841947. You can find some houses.
Yeah, but with all of their fancy computer technology in the 23rd century, for some reason you don't get, and if you write this number backwards, it's the coordinates of a forbidden planet. Well, that would be interesting.
Which, by the way, this supercomputer that could find the fact that there's the coordinates of a planet, at no point does it say, warning, you are going to this planet will violate General Order 7. Do not go. Are you sure you want to do this?
Well, to be fair, maybe General Order 7 is not yet in effect, but after the first time, it was like, okay, nobody go there. After the second time they go, maybe that's when they say, okay, really, now we need a general order, pain of death situation. Possibly? Because frankly, after the first time they went, let's be honest, when we talked about the cage, they were powerful aliens, but are they that much more powerful than all the other aliens they've encountered? Especially given the understanding that they kind of came to at the end of that episode. It was, you know what I mean? So there wasn't, you could retcon the idea that really what happened at the end of the cage was not enough to really have the pain of death to go back. Well,
and if I'm not mistaken, though, General Order 7 has not been established as having the death penalty. General Order 4 has.
What was it was General Order 4,
and we're not actually given a clear understanding of what General Order 4 is.
Okay.
But still, it's very serious. Do not approach this planet under any circumstances. And actually, that would have been. I mean, they're kind of relying on the audience here to know what Talos 4 is.
Oh yeah.
And if it actually, I think would have been better, both for the fans and for new people who don't know what Talos 4 is, to give them a little bit more. And instead of just having Michael say, go to this planet that you've never heard of, new viewer, have Michael say, go to this planet you've never heard of. And then the computer say, it is forbidden to approach Talos 4 under any circumstances. And that would at least tell the new viewer something about Talos 4 that ups the drama about it.
I'm sure, obviously, looking at the teasers for the next episode, they'll probably go into that.
Well, and to go back to your point about shows that are binged, if you're binging this, you'd get that in about 5 seconds, and after you get 5 seconds into the credits, and it switches over to the next episode. So that might be at play here. But you're right. I mean, it wouldn't have taken much to just have the warning come up on the computer.
Even just to have where the computer didn't say anything, even if there's just like a red warning sign at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
Just that simple little banner saying warning.
Right.
Left it at that.
So and I have to say, looking at the previews, I'm kind of excited about Talosians and like the possibilities. I mean, there's great potential and great potential disaster, but I'm kind of excited about the possibilities.
Next episode looks interesting.
Yeah. So, any other points that we didn't cover that you'd like to bring up here, Father Corey?
Just one minor thing. When Pike switched control of the shuttle over to Tyler, he asked if he has any stick time, and of course, that's an old pilot's term for actually flying the plane. But of course, which is interesting because what do shuttles at that time have? They don't have sticks. It's all touch control.
Yep. Jimmy, anything?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. So before we finish out here, I do want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible to create the Secrets of Star Trek for everyone. Today, we're going to thank by name Christopher K., Janelyn M., Angie T., John H., and Mark S. It's through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give that they make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows we do at sqpn.com. And you could join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of this episode, Light and Shadows? Let us know by visiting sqpn.com/trek or the SQPN Facebook page, and leave us some feedback or send us an email to trek@sqpn.com. You can find any links relevant to our discussion on our show notes at sqpn.com. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing those Talosians in the next episode titled If Memory Serves. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Live long and prosper, Dom.
And Father Corey Stiga, thank you as well.
Yeah, thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, Trust the math.